Hey everybody, it's Larry Berman here. It's early Friday morning before we've seen any of the employment situation reports. And the reason I'm coming to you this early on a Friday versus normally at the end of the trading day is because I've got a big golf tournament today. It's our annual member guest invitational at my club, and all will know who followed me for a long time. I'm an avid golfer, and whenever possible, trying to be on the golf course. And today's not an ideal day. Usually it's pretty quiet around the July 4th holiday, and that's kind of where we have the event. Yesterday was the practice round. I played like terrible, really bad. Wasn't striking the ball, and so don't expect to be ultra competitive today, but you never know which back of mine shows up on any given day. So here's what's on my mind. Let's dive into some of the headlines here and then into the chart room and see what we learned this week. So did a little search, Kamala versus Biden in the polls, and looked at some of the headlines that come up. And, you know, it's clear in my mind. It's probably not clear in the president's mind. Not much is these days. The senility that seems evident, speech after speech, is weighing on his future. It seems clear to me this week that Congress is now getting behind, the governors are now getting behind a change in leadership. So it's almost definitely going to happen, and the question is who. What I've learned in my lifetime is that money always rules, and apparently all the money that's been raised by the Biden-Harris ticket needs to stay with Harris. Or can't be used effectively. That's what I've heard. I haven't vetted any of this, but I've heard it from several people, sources, who I would think ought to know those things. So, in all likelihood, Kamala's at the top of the ticket, and then the question is, well, who's next on the ticket? So, how does that play out? That part we don't have a lot of clarity on. When we look at popularity, so again, some of the headlines say she's polling better than Trump. She's polling better than Biden versus Trump, but still down. She has out of all the names out there, the best national recognition. And so, again, in all likelihood, she's going to be at the top of the ticket. Is it Gretchen Whitmer? Is it various key swing state governors? Probably is the answer, because the choice for running mate is always, or ought to be always, someone who can make a difference on the margin. Kamala Harris was thought to be able to make a difference for Biden for a couple obvious reasons. And she really hasn't. She's been invisible for the most part during his presidency. You can see here in the approval ratings that, there's no love for her in America. So it's gonna be tough, and it seems like Donald Trump is really going to be the next president of the United States, which pains me to no end to think about. But right now, probably a better choice. So here's an interesting headline we came across, that Michelle Obama would poll 11 points in a recent poll, 11 points ahead of Trump. So that would be interesting as a dark horse. But again, insiders comment that that's unlikely going to happen. So in other interesting things, so when we think about the different asset classes that might represent risk off, bonds obviously come to mind. And so a few months ago, bond yields were ripping higher. Um, AGG, broad US ETF aggregate, XBB, broad aggregate in Canada, selling off for the most part. With the May 1st FOMC, we got the pivot, we got the Treasury announcement on refunding, more bills than bonds, and bonds have recovered. But on a year-to-date basis, still really not a great investment. So is a recession coming? Again, what we've heard in the last few weeks or what we've seen on the economic data is, there's clear decay in growth in both Canada, US, and globally. ISMs, etc., are all pointing towards sort of a weaker economic growth. The labor market, again, that data is going to be out shortly here. Probably still okay. Again, bullish, no. Great, no. Weakening, yes, but okay still. And so we'll hear from more Fed speakers on the update of the latest bit. And of course, once that piece of data comes out, it's okay, what's the next inflation report? So, jobs and inflation is still on the front burner in terms of central bank policy. And I think, and I've said for a couple of years now, the fastest policy tightening cycle that we've ever had, to me, has to end in a hard economic landing. So that's still in the back of my mind, and duration as an asset class, as bond yields, rise and credit spreads widen, to me, that's opportunity. But right here, right now, is not somewhere where I'd be aggressively chasing. We don't get another quarterly refunding update for another month into early August. And when we get that, expectations, because the deficit's getting worse, are likely going to point to a wide, backing up in the yields again, widening in credit spreads, probably, unless, again, one of the bullish cases out there is Treasury, because they want to support the Democrats through the election, choose more bills than bonds, and that would be more of a liquidity positive for capital markets. You probably all have heard first half of the year is good, second half of the year is good, in terms of history of markets. And so, you've got positive sentiment generally. You got positive historical anecdotes generally. You've got market expecting easing generally. So all those things are positive. And so the risk of that being well known is that we get some kind of other scenario. So here's something that, I'm looking at this morning in terms of it may be expected, maybe not. I'm not a close follower of crypto. Everyone will know I'm an outspoken critic of it. I think it is generally a Ponzi scheme, and history will tell us what it really ends up being. But again, to me, it's worth what the next person will pay for it. And today, the next person is not willing to pay a whole lot more than yesterday, with Bitcoin down pretty hard this morning. And so there was some confiscation of I guess some Bitcoin from illegal channels, and that might enter markets and it might be sold in some of the weaker currencies. Also some calls around the election. So you see this story here. You've got this Mt. Gox restructuring, and a lot of that Bitcoin now back in people's pockets. That might be sold, etc. So, you have a Bitcoin chart that prior to this story was sitting on the 200-day average. So, let's have a look at that and look at this chart and see, on a Bitcoin basis, what happened the last time, some technical levels broke for Bitcoin. So in the meme craze run up of COVID, you had this massive move up and massive correction as money was given to day traders that didn't have anything to do with it. A lot did feed into crypto. It created that first bubble. You had the echo bubble, the retest, the failure, the double top, and this whole distribution channel that lasted the better part of 2 years, as it finally broke. Now, what happened in here? This was the SEC in October, turning more favorable on the outlook for approving Bitcoin ETF. Bitcoin ETF comes out, so it got a little front run, bit of correction, sell the news, and then you had this other run up. Again, retesting the old highs, slightly new high here, slightly new high here, failure, breakdown, support, and so that is playing out right now. So where does this all go? The answer is lower. A chart like this is death. It's the ugliest picture that you can have in a technical chart where the trend is up, you failed to make a higher high, you've broken a long-term trend line, and you've broken interim support. There isn't anything more bearish in terms of a chart pattern behaviorally than what we're seeing here now in Bitcoin. Take it for what it is and who it's coming from, but this is kind of an avoid. And when you think about where it might go, for me, markets always investigate. So again, Bitcoin launch in here, I would say at a minimum, we're going to test that. Could be this weekend, right? Like we can get a real big flush here in really short order. Could be the bottom of that channel too. And that's where you would find the initial support, and markets would almost certainly rally off that given the nature of Bitcoin. Could all the people who got sucked in here on the ETF trade, are weak holders late to the game, don't have the stomach for the hodl kind of crowd that have been in it for years and years and years and years? Where do they all capitulate down to? And that is probably closer to this breakout in here. So, my call would be Bitcoin 30,000 before we see new highs again. Will we see new highs? I don't know. I don't care. I'm not going to play it. But of course, the Bitcoin bulls will tell you, to the sky and, tweet a rocket ship and all that stuff. And finally, the biggest speculation of all is Trump media. And again, here's another chart that looks like death. This company is almost certainly never going to make any money for anybody. It's just a pure leverage speculation on Donald Trump's brand. Would I short it? No, because it can easily run on meme type speculation into the recession, into the election, followed by a recession. And so this is something, for risk on, risk off election that now it's on my front burner. Again, I'm not recommending people buy it, not recommending people trade it. I'm looking at it from a sentiment perspective. And so it'll be interesting rolling everything back to Kamala and, what we might see ultimately there. And that is, let's look at sentiment indicators around the election outcome and see what that might bring, because it does matter for asset markets. But right now the thinking is, if you look at some of the polls, you get a clean sweep of the Republicans, gives them a mandate. Trump's tax cuts, everything like you're gonna get a resurgence of inflation. Ultimately, probably means a bump and then a harder landing on the other side of that. Markets, are they going to start reacting to that at some point when we get a little bit more clarity on who's going to be on the tickets? That'll be more of the focus for the market. And if it does shape up to be more of a Republican sweep of the Senate, Congress, and the White House, that will be something to really move markets later this year. Have a great start to the summer, everybody. Get out there and enjoy the hot weather.